welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have a lot to discuss. First things first, I want to thank everyone who has subscribed to the channel and any new listeners. It really does help me out when you do that. If you're watching over on Apple or Spotify, if you could rate and review the show, it really does help out as well. I know we're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We're about to cross 400, so I really do appreciate all of the new people that have come on. Just a little bit of a heads up, if you are hearing ads over on Apple and Spotify, that's because I am partnered with the Believe Podcast Network. Anything that you do over there does help out those sponsors, and I really do appreciate it. As I alluded to last week, I'm going to have 2 different episodes this week with guests, and we're going to do one football-centric and one basketball-centric. For this first episode, we have Jordan Harper of Tide Illustrated and the Rivals Network at Harper Nation 24 over on Twitter. He also has his own podcast called The Double Dribble Podcast on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you can get your podcasts. So if you do not know him already, please check out his channels and such. I really do appreciate him coming on and talking Alabama basketball with me. We talked all about Alabama basketball in this episode. We talked about the new commit. We talked about Latrell Wrightsell. We talked about the new coaching staff. We talked about the new players. We talked about his expectations. This is a really, really fun episode. I really had a lot of fun shooting it. So if you are interested in this type of content, please subscribe to the channel, as I mentioned already, and we will keep all of this going. But I will cut to the episode that I recorded just a bit earlier with Jordan Harper. Welcome into the show. We have Jordan Harper of Tide Illustrated at Harper Nation 24 over on Twitter. Thank you so much for joining the show. How you been?
Great, Owen. Appreciate you having me on. It's been a good, entertaining off season, but needless to say for Alabama basketball. So it keeps somebody like me busy.
Absolutely, 100%. And as you kind of alluded to, and as I talked about at the top of the show, you obviously have the basketball podcast, the Double Dribble Podcast. If anybody is not already subscribed, please do so. So I have you on. We're going to talk basketball. I know a lot of people here subscribe to my channel as well. They love when we talk basketball here in the off season. There's some huge news, and I know a couple of people commented about it at the bottom of my episode that went live last week. And yes, I saw those comments, but basically right after my episode went live, Alabama gets its probably final commit of the season. Can't say guaranteed final commit, but this does get us up to 13 in Collins Chidera Onyejiaka. More than happy to pronounce his name correctly once we get a pronunciation guide, but that's what we're going to go with for now. He goes by Collins Chidera over on Instagram. A big man that is, classifying up from the 2026 class. Huge body and 6'10", 270. What have you heard about him? I know he's a top 100 guy across most recruiting sites that I've seen. Have you really heard much about him at this point?
Coming into it, no. When he was visiting, it's around the time where 2026 prospects tend to start taking their visits. AAU kind of gets busy during the summer, but a lot of the 2026 kids, you saw Caleb Holt visit Alabama recently in the past month or so as well. So summer's typically when these 2026 kids start becoming more active recruiting-wise, but he really wasn't on my radar at first. I knew once he set a visit out of nowhere that something could have been up with him. But, I mean, he's just a major physical presence in the lane. Like, he's a big-body guy. I know over at Rivals says that he's 230 pounds, and other recruiting sites have 270. He's a lot closer to that 270 than 230, I'll tell you that. He's a huge human being. He's just physically dominant in the competition that he's played at the Newman School. So you tend to be a little more skeptical of big guys that play at prep schools. Not saying like Prolific Prep or those high major, high level prep schools, but schools like the Newman Prep, you kind of are skeptical of those big guys because they are playing against a lot smaller people than they are. Kind of see how physically dominating he is in that league that he plays in. But to me, physically, he's probably close to maxed out. Like he can't get much bigger than what he is. The main thing is to shed a lot of baby fat off of him, get more stronger, muscular, but he's not a offensive threat. He's not going to be a guy that's going to put up 12, 15 points a game. He's not going to be a guy that steps out and shoots 15 footers or beyond. He's not going to be any of that. He's just going to be a guy that you're going to throw in there, at least for his first year, for a few minutes. If there's foul trouble, to get rebounds, to hold his own in the paint, maybe protect the rim a little bit. But he's just going to be a guy that's going to take up a lot of space, and that's what he's going to do. Aiden Sherrell's going to do that in his own right.
Mm-hmm.
Noah Williamson's a big guy too. But you can't have too many big men, as you've seen with teams like Florida. I mean, they just rotate them in droves, and based on the additions that Alabama's made this offseason, they haven't added anybody shorter than 6'5". So they obviously saw something with their height disadvantage they had facing teams like Duke and Florida in the postseason. But he's a project player, and he's going to be a guy that they see something in. And if it doesn't pan out in the first couple years, then with the transfer portal, he can go find another home, and Alabama can easily replace him just as quickly as they found him.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that if nothing else, as much as what he's going to do on the floor in game, it's also what he's going to do in practice, right? Going up against a guy of that size and that physically demanding is just going to make the other players around him better, right? When you're looking at an Aiden Sherrell or you're looking at a Noah Williamson, them having to go against him every day and go up against that 260, 270, 6'10", that's just a presence, right? And obviously I'm not comparing him to this guy, but it's like the people that had to play against Shaq, right? Like if you had to go against that every day, you're just going to get better. Like you have to, because like you're going up against a guy that's just physically bigger than you and is just dominating you. It's honestly similar to how Zach Edey did a few years ago, right? At Purdue. It's when you have a player of a certain stature and that size, especially if they have that physical asset, it's a really tough thing to guard. And like I said, even in practice, I think he's going to make the team better. Would you say that this is a situation of Alabama just going after another big man because that's where they thought they were weak on the team overall? Would you consider this a bit of an indictment, maybe on Noah Williamson? I know he's a guy that some of the reports coming out, or he has not had as good of a summer as some of the other newcomers. Let's put it lightly. Would you consider it some of that, or do you think this is just a situation of, big guys are always good to have? You're going against Florida. You're going against some of these ones. You need some extra fouls. It's not the worst idea to have an extra big body, et cetera. That's a good spot to fill.
Yeah, front court players are definitely harder to come by. You can find guards in the portal, no problem. They're expensive. As we've seen guys like Boogie Flan, Xavier Lee, those guys getting up in like the $3 million range. But Collins to me is just he's cheap. He's probably not going to cost a whole lot just because he's 17 years old, should be his senior year, he's going into college. And being a project player, he's, like you said, he's going to be a guy that's going to be a good practice body to help Aiden grow and Noah Williamson grow, because if they just each go at it every day in practice, they'll just get tired of hitting each other. Now you throw another body in there. A fair, I believe, comp for somebody that played at Alabama was probably a Richard Hendricks when he came freshman year, guy that's up my way from Athens. And I mean, when he came in, he was just huge. And, he didn't have a whole lot of skill going in, but he developed that in 2 or 3 short years at Alabama and ended up being a very successful pro overseas. But he's just going to be a guy that they looked at as somebody that, hey, this is somebody that's going to help us at latest the following year, because he is going to be very young. But they wouldn't have gotten him and asked him to reclassify. Obviously, they looked into that before, but he could be a guy that could play 5 to 6, 7 minutes a game this upcoming year, give him some solid minutes against some, bigger front courts like teams like Florida. It would have been helpful to have somebody like that against, say, an Auburn last year to kind of help on the boards and the rim defense. But, obviously they see something in him. I don't think it's necessarily that they lost faith in Noah Williamson per se. I will kind of get into that how I saw him in practice in a few minutes, I'm sure. But he hasn't had a great offseason, but that's just because he's come in out of shape based on the pace of play. He played at Bucknell. But that's obviously he's obviously really skilled for his size. But I don't think it has any indication of how they feel about Noah. I think it's more of they think Collins can help them in the near future.
Sure. Yeah. And I agree with that. I generally didn't think that it was a no. I felt like I had to bring it up because I know that anybody that's on the message boards or Discords or Twitter or whatever, we've heard and we've seen the comments. So I just wanted to bring it up. But I do agree. I think that it was more of the fouls, more of the bigger body was the reasoning behind it. And obviously the cost that helps when you're dealing with, having a guy like that. And so like I said, I fully agree with that kind of standpoint. So obviously we're recording this for anybody that's unaware on June the 23rd, and just a little bit earlier today, Alabama officially announced, and this was something we were expecting, officially announced that Latrell Wrightsell is medically cleared and is being granted his medical red shirt for last season. Obviously, this is huge news that he is officially back. They had already previously announced that Houston Millet's Redshirt had been cleared. Obviously, this is great news to hear, getting back a top 10 shooter in the country, the year that he took us to the Final Four. And, obviously Alabama, I think even last season in the games that he played, he was a huge difference maker in those games, right? Like looking back, if you look back at any of those highlights of just the few games he played last season, the floor was a completely differently spaced team. Alabama flowed differently with Latrell on the floor. What do you think kind of the biggest thing that he brings back to the team is? Obviously, we know what he is. He's been on this team for a couple of years now, but what do you think that obviously he brings in, especially like post Achilles?
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how much he actually, brings like athletically and mobility wise, because all the injuries that he's endured all since Cal State Fullerton. I mean, it's just been concussions and then Achilles, and had some knee troubles over there as well. And he's not getting any younger, and his body's not getting any younger. So it's going to be interesting to see what his minute distribution is going to be like coming into it. And they are deeper now with the additions they've had in the backcourt, especially with Houston Millett. And he's another one. It's like, how durable is he going to be going into the season? Because he could take a lot of pressure off Latrell just as much as Latrell can take pressure off of him minutes-wise, because they play the same positions. But having him back is huge, just because the floor kind of shrunk a little bit last year when Latrell went down and Houston went down, just because those are probably two of the best shooters on the team last year, especially considering Mark Sears struggled as much as he did, which Aiden Holloway, came into his own, and that helped tremendously. But it really came down to Mark and Aiden being the primary outside shooters last year. And if you added Latrell and Houston into that, would have been a lot more spaced floor. But he brings size for one. He's 6'3", 6'4"-ish. I got to see him up in person. He looks closer to 6'4", just because I am 6'2.5", 6'3". He is a little bit taller than me, but he brings size. He's a really good defender. I think that's one underrated aspect of him, is that he moved pre-Achilles, moved really well, kept his guy in front of him. But I mean, you first look at his 43% three-point shooting on pretty heavy volume, especially the Final Four year. I mean, he's a guy that is, when he's not in there, you feel it, just because, I'm sure everybody saw the John Rothstein tweet today that Alabama was 10-0 when he scored double digits. And I mean, it's just huge for them. I mean, he's a catalyst off the bench. I don't know if he'll start next year. They'll probably ease him in and he'll come off the bench. But if you get guys like Aiden Holloway and Latrell Wrightsell or Houston Millett coming off the bench, I mean, it's about as deep of a team in the backcourt as you can imagine, shooting wise. So having him back, just, one more piece to the puzzle, and another guy that Nate Oates can kind of design to space the floor and kind of get him manufactured looks. And that'll be great for him. It'll be great for LeBaron Philon, Aiden Holloway, all the other creators on the team.
Yeah, and you talked about the manufactured looks. That was something that I don't know if you remember, but I know when Nate was asked about that 10-0 with Latrell being double digits, he was asked about it in a press conference during that Final Four season. And Nate kind of talked about that as being a barometer for how well the ball moved for that specific team, because he was like, we don't really draw up a lot of plays for Trelly. So when he's scoring in double digits, it really just means the ball's moving really well and it's finding him when he's open. And, I think that is something that you probably will see a little more this season. Obviously, with just the mega with the team, I think you will be drawing up plays for him. You will be drawing up plays for Houston. And obviously, that's going to help get him some additional looks. I will say the thing that with the Achilles that does give me a little hope is Trelly's game was not built on just overwhelming athleticism. Right. Because of that, it wasn't like, oh, he was a guy that could jump out of the gym prior to his injury. Right. That was not what his basketball game was. And so because of that, that does give me some hope that he could be back to full, near 100%, right? Whether or not it's 100 or not, we'll see. But he could be closer back just because he wasn't relying on athleticism to, be the difference maker in him versus another guy.
Yeah, correct. And I mean, it will be a little bit more pressure on those the creators, because you don't have a Mark Sears to bail you out this year. You have, a year 2 LeBaron Philon and year 3 Aiden Holloway, year 2 in Nate Oates' system. But I mean, you might have to drop a little bit more looks for him or Houston Millette, early on before they actually get the gel together. Because a lot of these guys, while they played last year and maybe a year before under Nate, this collective group of guys haven't played a whole lot of minutes together. So you might see a little bit more manufactured looks. I know Nate doesn't do a lot of that, like you mentioned. But a lot of the sets that he does run, typically out of horns, he likes to get his wing shooters or his corner guys in the horns formation kind of come up off a flare or a double drag or something, kind of getting some manufactured shots up. And guys like Latrell and Houston are going to be great in that role, just because they didn't really have anybody outside of Aiden last year that could do it.
Absolutely, 100%. And you kind of got into it there. And I know you talked about it a little bit earlier that you were at basketball practice a couple of weeks ago. And for those of you unaware, in addition to Jordan writing and being on Twitter, he also does coach high school basketball. And so that he was a part of the Alabama basketball camps that they do and was there. So he was able to see some of the newcomers. So I wanted to ask you a little bit, and I know you talked about this again over on your podcast at The Double Dribble. If y'all have not seen it, please check it out. But you talked a little bit about some of the different newcomers. So just was going to ask, what stood out. I know the newcomers that are kind of jumping off the page, Bethea is the one that everybody knew about kind of coming into. And then at least from what I have heard, a lot of the other, hype has been around Bristow. But what were your kind of thoughts when you saw kind of the different guys at practice?
Yeah, it was really cool. The first day I was there for 2 days. I got to go watch Hoover and Hale County play. Two of the top players in the state play on each of those squads. But day 1 I didn't get to stay as long. But Aiden Holloway wasn't there. He was sick. You had some guys working on the side like Latrell Wrightsell, Amari Allen's nursing an injury. Apparently London Jemison was sick a lot of the offseason coming in, so he didn't do a whole lot of work, which was mainly drill work. They didn't really go live much at all. Second day they did, which I'll get into. But just going through drill work, obviously Jalil Bethea is going to have Ryan Williams type aura around him when it comes to the fan base, especially the younger fan base, because he is very popular on social medias and things like that. But raw athleticism is off the charts with him. His shot, it looks like it's going in every single time. Like he's so fluid in what he does. You can see why he was a projected lottery pick player coming out of high school. Obviously had a lot of turmoil happen at Miami with Larinaga stepping down all of a sudden mid-season. Things like that just really messed with him and his development year 1. But he gets a second crack at it because it did come down to Miami and Alabama for him. Gets to go to Tuscaloosa, playing Nate Oates' free playing system. And I think he slots in probably better at the 3 spot for me, just because of his size, being 6'5", 6'6", 200 pounds. And defensively, he looked really good. Looked like he moved really well with the smaller guards. Shot, athleticism. I mean, he checks all the boxes off the eye test. Keaton Bristow is another guy, like you mentioned. He was probably the most surprising to me, just because I didn't expect much from him coming from Tarleton State. One of the lower conferences in Division One. Obviously, he was freshman of the year, so he had some kind of good pedigree coming about him. But I mean, he's bigger than I thought. He's about closer, probably 6'8" than 6'7" that he was listed coming out of Tarleton. But gosh, he can shoot. He's so athletic, so smooth. Fluid is the first word that comes to my mind with him, and he just moves so well. And I really think that he's going to be a guy that will contribute year one at Alabama. I think he's physically ready. He looked the part, and against high-level SEC competition that's already on the team, I mean, he was one of the few guys that really stuck out to me, saying, "Hey, he might be one of the better players on the team." And that's just my first time ever watching him in person. I have no bias towards him or anything, so he really stuck out. And then Taylor Bolbowen, I mean, he's a guy that I was excited about once he announced he was transferring to Alabama. He's a guy that will immediately step into the role that Jaron Stevenson played. Similar build, similar height. I think Bolbowen's wingspan's a few inches longer than Jaron Stevenson, so kind of projects more as a defensive four that can, like a 3-and-D 4 spot, can play the 5 against smaller lineups. He's going to be a very versatile guy. Now, I hope they don't try to force him into the 3 spot like they did Jaron Stevenson so much, because I felt like that was a mistake more times than not. But you let him play the 4 majority of the time. I mean, he's a mixture of, Grant Nelson and Jaron Stevenson's, athleticism, their body, all of that. But he's a better shooter than either one of them. And that's going to be huge for floor spacing for Nate, that they really didn't have last year, because nobody respected Grant Nelson shooting the 3, rightfully so. It's a career 30%er. And then Big Cliff, I mean, I think he shot maybe 2 or 3 threes all year, but he's going to be a key component in this upcoming year's team, just because if he shoots 37, 38, 39 or plus percent from 3 on 3 to 4 attempts, what he brings defensively and athletically, I mean, he's going to be a difference maker. I was really excited to see him. And quickly, Amari Allen, I mentioned that he did a lot of side work, but man, he is going to be probably the best freshman of this class, just from an athletic standpoint. He's got a great shot. It's a very repeatable shot, smooth, extremely athletic. Defensively, he's a work in progress, but hey, he's at Alabama. They don't have to play defense to win. So I think he's going to be a difference maker. I didn't get to see him play live because I think he's nursing an injury, but he's going to be a guy that I think Alabama fans are going to be really surprised about if he's able to step on the floor.
That's actually really surprising to hear. I know Amari Allen's been he's kind of the biggest question mark I have of the freshman class, just because his competition level where he was at was just not very good. Obviously, he was the player of the year in Wisconsin, but player of the year in Wisconsin doesn't always mean anything. But he is somebody that you hear a lot of things about, really, really good athleticism. Obviously he may be back from nursing that injury, because I've heard some really good things about his athleticism recently. I've obviously heard really good things about his shot. He is the kind of the player that I had the biggest questions about coming in, especially for the freshmen coming into this offseason, and have heard, very positive things. For me personally, I know you were talking about Taylor Bolbowen slotting into the 3. Obviously, I think that's where Keaton Bristow, playing as well as he has in this summer, like that's what he brings you. Is if you want to go with a big lineup, you have like a Bethea play the 2, you play Bristow at the 3, Bolbowen at the 4, and then an Aiden Sherrill at the 5, and you're just huge. Right? Like you're just absolutely massive. And I think that is what you're going to see more likely than Bolbowen play the 3. I think you're just going to see Keaton Bristow play the 3, because I think he's going to play obviously the 4 some as well, but I do think Bristow will be able to be that defensive 3 And I think his shot's going to be good enough and his offensive game is going to be good enough that he's going to slide in similar to like what you saw out of like Darion Reed. Because I think from what I've heard out of Bristow, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but I've heard that his defense is the part of the game that's actually stronger for him than his offense. Not that his offense is bad. I've heard that his shot's fine, but that his defense is really the place that he's been excelling, partially with his athleticism and how well he moves. So he can obviously be that kind of stopper at the three.
Right. And just kind of preface that, I said that I did not want Bo Bowen playing the three like they tried to force Jaron to do. I hope he stays at the 4, maybe the 5. But, yeah, Bristow moves so well. And part of that fluidity that I mentioned that kind of surprised me, defensively, that's where that's going to come into play. He's such an effortless mover. There's not a lot of wasted movement when he's, going side to side, horizontally chasing guys, things like that. I mean, he never got blown by on any of these blow-by drills that they tried to do one-on-one. And, I mean, he's a guy that's going to handle his own. And like I said, I did not know what to expect coming out of the WAC, but he was truly surprising. I think he will be an impact player this upcoming year.
Sure. And I know, asking you previously, you had said you didn't think that he was there. So I'm not sure what you maybe know about the new coach, Chris Fleming. Obviously, he's replacing Ryan Pannone that took the job at Arkansas State. Curious what your thoughts are. Obviously, Nate going back to the NBA, bringing also another guy from European basketball with Fleming's experience over coaching the German national team and over in Germany, where he was coach of the year a couple of times over in Bundesliga. What do you think that he brings to the table? Obviously, he's Nate's kind of had an archetype that he's looking for, with obviously NBA experience and that European experience to help him on the offense. What do you think that he brings? Obviously, this is Nate Oates' offense, but I expect something to be different with Chris Fleming. I just can't quite put my finger on what I think it might be.
Yeah, he typically always has a set role for guys on his staff. Preston's going to be, primarily recruiting. He's going to help a lot on the offensive end. When I was there for practice, I mean, you had all of the assistants. Now Fleming wasn't there yet. If he was, then I missed him. But they have all their assistants running certain parts of the practice, which I thought was really cool. So you had Preston running some, you had Chris Pino running some, you had Brian Adams running some. So where I think Chris falls into place is he's going to be the primary guy for player development. I think he will help offensively because he is a great offensive mind. It's just that he's always worked right under the head coach where he's been in the NBA. Never really got that chance to be the head coach. But he did coach, I think, 4 or 5 games under Billy Donovan with the Bulls. And I don't think he lost a single game out of those 4 or 5 that he coached as the head coach when Billy, I think, had COVID or something. But just the guys that he's coached in the NBA, I think he coached Jokic in his rookie year with the Nuggets. He's got about 10 years of NBA experience. All of the people I've talked to praised his player development that he had from year 1, year 2, year 3. All the players that he coached got collectively better. So I think that's probably going to be a similar role that he will play. It's not going to be cut and dry like Petway was offense, Hodgson was defense, Brian Hodgson was recruiting, and Charlie Henry was defense type of thing. I think Nate's going to take over a lot of the offense this upcoming year with input from Fleming and Murphy, but I think you might see Fleming honed in on a lot of the player development stuff.
Gotcha. And that'd be a great thing to have. Obviously, I think this roster is the best setup for what Nate's pie in the sky, what he wants a team to be able to do, all 5 guys on the floor to be able to pass, dribble, and shoot. He's said for many years, Aiden Sherrill was kind of his perfect archetype for a center because he could be able to stretch the floor and really give the spacing that you need. So obviously we've talked about all these things. Wanted to get some of, just to kind of close out, want to get your expectations for next season. And for this, I don't mean, hey, you have to tell me exact number of wins or anything like that. Personally, I always say that my expectations are got to make it to the second weekend and got to be a top 4 seed in the SEC tournament to get the double bye, right? That's what bare minimum expectations should be for NATO. It's kind of moving forward. I don't have any reason to suspect that this season's any different with the roster that we've put together. I think that obviously if you can go beyond that, you'd be very happy with it. But with a single elimination tournament, I would be more happy with somebody being stricter on the regular season expectations than on the tournament expectations, because the single elimination tournament is just super wacky and you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think the expectations become now as a top 4 seed, double bye in the SEC, and then make it to the second weekend. I think that's pretty bare minimum that I think that Alabama fans have come to expect. Now, the SEC's gotten a lot better in the past 2 to 3 years, especially with the portal. It's gotten deeper, had a record amount of teams in the tournament last year. But with the team that Nate Oates continues to bring in year out, I think top 4, top 5 in the SEC is my expectation this year. I do think they're a top 4 team in the SEC. Looking at, I want to deep dive into the teams, how they're currently constructed in the last week or so. And I still think Alabama, Collins aside, they're still a top 4 team. And when it comes to the tournament, like you said, it's Russian roulette when you get there, and like, what's the matchups like? Who's hot right now? All that, a lot of factors go into it. But I do expect them to win their first matchup, because I do think they'll be a top 4 seed nationally, and then get to the second weekend, because I don't think any team they're going to face in the first weekend is going to be better than them. That's why I always expect them the past 4 to 5 years to make it. And the only year that they didn't was the year that Javon Quinterly got hurt early in the game against Notre Dame. So, would they have made it then? Who knows? But every other year, that's been the case. And that's becoming the norm. That's becoming the expectations. And I really think that's going to be my expectation this upcoming year, just because they're so young this year. And I think that's going to be a case for a lot of teams in the country, around the country now, because all that super senior, that class is gone. So you're going to have teams with a lot of holes outside of the top 3 or 4 teams like Purdue or Houston, teams like that are just deep. So it's going to be a lot more wide open this year than it was last year. And I think Alabama's going to be right there in the top 15, top 20 in the country, and top 4 in the SEC, go to the second weekend. Those are all kind of my expectations. You make it to the second weekend, whatever happens for me at that point. If they go to the Sweet 16 and they lose to a top 5 seed or whatever, so be it. But I think top 4 SEC, make it to at least the second weekend is going to be kind of my expectations going into the year.
Yeah, and I think that something that I've talked about a lot is I think that Nate Oates' teams are incredibly difficult to prepare for in a single day. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think that it's so, for me, that if he gets past the first game, why it feels like the second game in some cases is a little easier. Just because, and obviously with Grand Canyon and some other games, that isn't always the case, but it does feel like that second, again, Nate Oates' ability and how his offense is constructed that, I think we get so used to playing SEC teams. Mm-hmm. And like, we see a Tennessee with Rick Barnes, or we see Bruce Pearl in Auburn that seem to have counters to what we do. And it's because they face us every year, right? They've seen Nate Oates' iterations and they've done all these different things. And so I think we get almost blind to the fact of who you're playing in the NCAA tournament is not a team that you faced, 15 times already under Nate Oates. They're not a team that knows every set that he runs, the sets that he does run, or knows exactly what type of, ball screen coverage he's going to do or whatever, right? And that's something that I think that people just have to consider when you're looking at these tournaments and stuff, that like the SEC gets us one view of things but again, those teams are all very used to seeing Nate Oates because you play every team every year And then obviously with the SEC tournaments and stuff, you may play a team 3 times in a year. That team's going to know a lot more about you than, somebody that's seeing your tape one time because they found out you were in their bracket 24 hours ago.
Right. Yeah. And typically they're tougher games where they're first ones in the NCAA tournament or the Sweet 16 games. Outside of, BYU, that wasn't bad at all. But, typically the Grand Canyons, those type of games, that the ones that, they have something like a niche about them that always gives Alabama trouble. And if I still feel like the Alabama team that lost to San Diego State, if they got by them, I feel like they would have won it all, or at least went to the Final Four. But that's why it's such a crapshoot when it gets to the NCAA tournament, because all it takes is one bad matchup for something like that to happen. And Nate Oates his system's really hard to prepare for, especially on a quick turnaround. You get a week to prepare; it's still a lot that you have to kind of prepare for. But that's what makes the SEC so tough, is there's several teams that are like that. I mean, it's just really it's a grind for 18 games every single year, and then you got the tournament, and that's why a lot of people think that the SEC, playing the SEC, is harder than playing in the NCAA tournament. It's something that I really can't refute.
Yeah, well, I mean, I 100% agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last thing, and I'm going to give mine up front so that you can think about it. I want to know who your player to watch for this season is. And what I mean by that is, I don't just mean like, oh, I think this guy is going to be to lead the team. I just think, this guy is going to either have a higher ceiling than people maybe anticipate or whatever. It could be somebody we already talked about. For example, my guy, I think, is going to be Houston Millette. He's a guy that I think some people really underestimated who he is. Mm-hmm. And that's because you see him come in from Pepperdine, and then you hear he's probably going to redshirt last season. And I think some people saw that redshirt as he wasn't good enough to play last season and didn't think of it as a medical redshirt when it was originally going to happen. And then they may have thought of it a little bit as a medical later. But in reality, Houston's reason for redshirting was partially because of medical, partially obviously learning the system and things. It was just different than Pepperdine was. But he was definitely good enough to play last season. And the North Carolina game showed you that. And I think with an additional offseason to obviously get his knees right and get everything right with him, he's going to be arguably the best shooter on the team this season. Now, obviously, Trelly and Bethea and Aiden are all going to have something to say about that. But there's a real argument that Houston, I think he has the prettiest shot on the team. I said that last season. His shot is just, it looks perfect when it comes out of his hand. So he's my guy. Do you have somebody like that for, you that you just think is going to take the step, is going to, go into their next role? Who is that guy for you?
Well, Houston Millette was the first guy that came to my mind, just because I know his dad, Wes. I've talked to him several times in the process of him coming over to Alabama. And great family. Houston's going to be a coach one day. He's going to lead a program. I have no doubt about it. That's the kind of character and pedigree he comes from. And watching the practice, he was by far the best shooter on the team. The shot's great, like you mentioned. I think he made 10 in a row in one drill to where he has to miss, or the defense has to get a stop to get off the floor, and he made 10 straight shots in a 2-on-1 closeout drill. I mean, he's just incredible. And I talked to a coach down there that felt like he would have started several games last year for him if he had not gotten hurt, and he's probably the best pure shooter on the team. But since you kind of took mine, I would probably say Aiden Sherrill is a guy that I truly believe watching him at practice is going to be a guy that's going to take that next step. Now, you only saw him for, spurts last year, about 8 minutes a game, I think. But he is a mountain of a man when you see him in person. You see it on TV, but you don't really understand until you see him in person how huge he is. And he moves so well now. And it looks like, I looked initially like he slimmed down, but he didn't slim down. He just gained a lot of muscle. And I think that's really going to help him. He's going to be in shape, which I feel like he wasn't in shape last year, which is kind of why he got injured. And being in shape, having a full off season to work out, get that muscle added on, sheds a lot of that baby fat. If he's 33 to 34-ish% from three and still getting, per 40 minutes, I think he was like 10 or 11 rebounds. But if he just gets 7 to 8 rebounds a game, shooting that percentage, he's going to go in the draft next year just because of how versatile and huge he is. And if he does all of that, Alabama's going to be pretty dang good too. So, I mean, he's a guy that I really see that's going to take that sophomore jump. Him and Jalil Bethea are two guys that I can really see that Aiden type jump, Aiden Holloway type jump that he took last year.
Yeah, and you talked about him slimming up. I agree with you. I think it wasn't exactly a slim. I think it was he came in with baby fat almost, and he turned that into muscle, but he's still kind of the same size that I think he slimmed up in part of the season last season, but he may have put it back on in muscle.
Yeah, he was wearing those long sleeves on his arms, and they were pretty baggy, but you could tell he's getting pretty ripped. So I mean, if he comes in shape and that good physically, he's gonna be a guy that can combat with those bigs from Florida.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jordan, for coming on. I want to roll out the red carpet for you. Tell the people where they can find you and how to keep up with everything that you got going on.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, like Owen said, at HarperNation24. I keep up with all Alabama basketball news. We'll post a lot of updates on there, as well as Tide Illustrated of the Rivals Network, which is transferring over to On3 at the end of the month. And you can subscribe to my podcast, the Double Dribble Podcast, on whatever platform that you listen on.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jordan, for your willingness to come on. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone, as always, for watching, and we will catch you in the next episode. Peace.